Everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven. This is NWSmallBatchBrewing, and today is a brew talk. And it's another talk about head retention. You know, as new information or, I see something that looks interesting, I like to make a little video, even if I've done it before. So to start with, and by the way, this should be a short video, I think. I always say that, but it never is. So a lot of people use Dextrin malt because although protein itself doesn't give you good head retention, the reactions to the protein within the beer gives you better head retention. But there has been recent information and articles stating that Dextrin malt doesn't really do a whole lot for you for head retention. And it's a bit of a misnomer that malting companies are trying to push. True or not, I don't know, but I have to be honest, I don't feel like I've gotten really great benefits from using like Dextrin malt. By the way, there's lots, every malting company practically has a version of a Dextrin malt. It usually has the word Dex in it somewhere. You know, Great Western has a Dextrin malt, it's Dex something. Breeze has their really common Dextrin malt. I think it's called Carapils. So there's a lot of them out there. They're all basically the same thing. And you usually add about 5% of your grist, your grain, amount of grain as a Dextrin malt. It doesn't add any flavor or change your gravity. It's simply to try to help with head retention and mouthfeel. Now, if it's working for you, don't stop, right? If it's working for you, that's great. I just personally my experience has been that it just hasn't been, it hasn't hurt, but it hasn't really helped either. What has helped me a lot is I switched from using, Dextrin malt to using oats, either rolled oats or flaked oats. You can buy flaked oats at your homebrew store. They cost more. Or you can just buy flaked oats, not flaked oats, rolled oats. Rolled oats from the grocery store, like Quaker or your, whatever store brand of rolled oats. And it's a lot less expensive and you can get a larger quantity. And it's the same amount, about up to 5% of your grain bill in oats. And I feel it adds a lot more mouthfeel than the Dextrin malt does. And I feel like it helps with the head retention quite a bit more. So that's a change I made a while back, and it's been working well for me. So let's talk about the good and the bad, and no ugly. Okay, so the good is hops, and I'm going to talk more about hops in a second here. But hops provide a lot of help when it comes to head retention. So if you're making something with not a lot of hops, you really need to add something like the oats to help with head retention because you're going to have problems there. The bad. There are some ingredients and things you put in your beer that can have the negative effect on head retention, right? Rice and corn in particular are known to be like head killers or whatever you want to call them, right? They're going to have the opposite effect. They're going to actually make your head retention worse. I got some more bad for you, I'm afraid. It used to be back in the day where you would do something called a protein rest when you were doing your mash. These days, that actually is detrimental. It's bad for your head retention. Things have come a long way since those old days, and we now have more modern malts that have, highly modified malts that don't benefit from the protein rest. And in fact, an extended protein rest with these highly modified malts can actually break down the protein in them to the point where it's actually detrimental. It's bad for your head retention. Another bad, and there's not a whole lot you can do about this, but high heat. High heat can also screw up your head retention. You have to boil, right? You could do a no-boil beer, I guess, and that would obviously be beneficial for head retention, but most of us are still doing a boil, so it is what it is, but that is definitely an element that affects it. The other thing that's interesting is that if you have foaming in the kettle or in the fermenter, that doesn't carry over to your glass. So if you had really good foaming and like, you know, when you have a croissant and it's really foaming up, none of that's translating to the glass. It's like a one and done sort of thing. Like if it foams up in the fermenter, it's not going to carry that over to the glass. So in this case, like using a spunning valve is actually beneficial because the spunning valve will help keep the foam down in the fermenter, and that will allow it to carry that over to the glass. You could also use, oh man, I can't think of what it's called now. There's these drops you can buy that you put in during the boil. I really recommend doing it. It's basically like a synthetic oil almost. And what it does is it breaks the surface. So if you're doing your boil, it helps keep from boilovers because it stops it from foaming up. And you can even put a couple drops into your fermenter if you don't have a lot of headroom, and that'll also keep your croissant down and won't have as vigorous, you know, exploding croissant if you use it. Yeah, if I think of it, I'll put a picture across the screen. It's in the fridge. I'm not going to grab it, but so that's helpful. So the last thing that's really interesting here, and I don't think it's something we can really utilize at the homebrew level, but it's called tetra hop. Now, initially you would think, oh, it's a new variety of hop that I can use to put into my beer and give it better head retention. Not really, sort of, but not really. It's actually like an extract. So it's like a hop extract, if you will. It's a liquid. It's not an actual, like, you know, leaf. I mean, it's derived from a hop, but it goes into your beer after fermentation. So like, let's say you were going to keg it, you could put it in the keg and then fill your keg, right? Well, the problem is, and this is where it gets difficult for homebrewers, is that CO2 reacts with it. So if you put it in your keg and then put on the CO2 to carb it, it will actually drop that tetra hop out of your beer. And it really doesn't help you at that point, right? Because you need it to stay mixed in. So they recommend not purging or pushing your beer with CO2, but instead using nitrogen, pure nitrogen. Pure nitrogen. Yes, that's what I said. At least that's what the articles were saying. That's what the write-up, I think, says from Yakima Valley Hops. I think that's where I was reading it. And it was going into in-depth how you'd have to place it down the middle of your keg and have a special release thing. I mean, it was something that I just don't think a home brewer is really going to gravitate towards with all that kind of specialized equipment and stuff that you need. Just for the nitro alone is kind of a hassle. Anyway, it's a product that's out there. I'm just mentioning it because it's supposed to help with head retention. I just don't know, you know, how you'd use it at the homebrew level. So that's all I have for today. I hope that maybe there's some new information there that's interesting about head retention that you hadn't thought of before. And I'll see you again in another week for another video. And until then, keep on brewing.